latest episode of the Healthy Gospel Church podcast, broadcasting here from Edinburgh, Scotland. But my guest is about 3,000 miles away in Pennsylvania in the USA. My guest today is Dr. Diane Langberg. Diane will be known to many of you. In my opinion, she is the leading expert on analysing abuse in the church. Her book, Redeeming Power, Understanding Authority and Abuse in the Church, is absolutely outstanding. It's not her only book. She's also written Suffering and the Heart of God, How Trauma Both Destroys and How Christ Restores. So, remarkably, Diane has been working in this field for just over 50 years, which is really quite remarkable. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
It's lovely to have you with us. Most of our people here in Scotland will know about you, but perhaps you can introduce our podcast today by just telling a little about yourself, especially maybe how you became a Christian, and then we'll talk about your professional life after that.
I became a Christian as a child at my mother's knee, literally.
Wow.
My father was a colonel in the Air Force, and so he was often going on missions, and we always had family devotions, whether he was there or not. And I couldn't tell you what it was, but one of them kept me awake at night, so I ran back to my mother in tears, and she responded to my thinking and my fears, and I knelt at her side and asked Christ into my life. So I think I was probably 11 years old.
Would you say growing up you had good role models both in the family and in your church environment?
Certainly in my family. It's hard to say about the church because we moved all the time.
Yeah.
And so my mother was brought to Christ as an adult when my father was away for a year in Korea, and we were all left in the United States, and we went to a tiny little country church. I couldn't tell you very much about it, but that's where she came to Christ.
Good.
And
I mean, it's great to hear, that America does have tiny little country churches, because we often imagine it as the nation of the mega church, forgetting that most churches are just ordinary little churches.
yes.
So you went to high school, you went off to, we call it university, you call it college. What was your major at college?
Psychology.
Psychology, no surprises there. And then you went off to do post-grad work, yeah? Tell us
Yes,
a
I
bit about
did.
that.
But both of those things were very unusual for a female in those days. I was the only female in my doctoral program, and in the psychology class, I was one of just maybe 2 or 3 females. The rest were all males.
Yeah. And I understand that a big issue when you qualified would have been sort of post-traumatic stress. Vietnam was very much on the go, dealing with vets. Is that the kind of professional environment that you were thrust into?
I was thrust into an environment where, number one, women asked to see me because I was a female. There were almost no, particularly in the Christian world, but there were almost no female psychologists. Post-traumatic stress disorder did not exist as a category when I first started out. And I began learning about it, though I didn't know that's what I was learning, by meeting with Vietnam vets.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, tell us how you moved into, from maybe general psychology more into specific Christian counseling, and especially this whole area of trauma and abuse.
Well, as I was finishing up my doctorate, I was given a position at a Christian counseling center in the area. And so I learned under that man for a good number of years. It was very unusual to have Christian counseling available anywhere. So I was part of a small group that was rare. And I saw a lot of females because I was the only female on staff. It was, females were very rare at the time, and so they would ask to see me, not because I knew anything. I was
Yeah.
like my early 20s, for goodness sakes, um, but because they felt more comfortable talking to me. And nobody talked about abuse because it wasn't a category.
Yeah.
And so women would say things, or sometimes teenagers would say things like, "My father does weird things to me." And I had no idea what that meant until they explained it to me. So I began working with uh, girls and women who were being abused by their fathers, and there was nothing was available. There were no books, there was no writing, there was no. A lot of times, nobody even seemed to think it was wrong. So it was quite a hill to climb.
It's absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Um, can you, I mean, we talk about abuse, it's not a monolithic thing. Especially, you've spoken about sexual abuse there. Are there various categories of abuse that are found, especially in churches?
Say that again. How?
Are there various categories of abuse out there? The ones we find especially in churches.
Well, yes, church abuse. Which is, I mean, there's sexual abuse, there's sexual abuse in families, there's rape, there's domestic violence, there's all kinds of things that happen both in and outside the church realm. Sadly, the church is no different about those things than out in the world. But then there are also specific things that develop in a church where there is abuse of power and things like that, with pastors and others in uh, high places in Christendom, and how they misuse the power that they have.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about abuse these days. Do you think that the incidence and level of abuse in churches is higher than in any other, sector of society? The examples would be industry or education, um, business, law, a lawyer's office, whatever.
I actually don't have any way to speak to that. I don't have numbers in terms of whether
What's
it's.
your inclination based on just life experience?
Um, well, I see people who've been. A lot of the people I see who've been abused were abused in their homes
Hmm.
growing up. And
Hmm.
then, of course, many of them were abused being in positions of less power. So that can obviously happen in churches and in homes, but it can also happen in the workplace.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those who are further down on the scale in terms of power are often the ones who are abused.
Yeah. Do you think there's elements of church culture that aid and abet abuse? Um, for example, shame. Obviously, there's power dynamics. There's maybe a lot of physical stuff at churches, hugging, stuff like that. That's sometimes you can almost get abuse in plain sight. Cultures of secrecy. So I'm really interested to find out, cultural issues and behavioral issues in churches that exacerbate this whole abuse thing.
Well, one of the ways that they do that is to say that it can't happen in the church.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's just something people state and believe, and
yeah,
many of them believe it because they so long for it to be true, but it's
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. One thing, I mean, I'm interested. We're over here in the United Kingdom. The Archbishop of Canterbury had to resign a few months ago because of an abuse scandal. The Church of England, has been affected by it. There has been major abuse scandals. Diane, is it has the abuse, do you think, increased? Or do you think it's just that the level of reporting has increased, that people are no longer tolerating it?
Well, certainly the level of reporting has increased greatly, and for that I am very thankful, because what we're doing is bringing evil to the light. You're not going to do anything about evil if you don't know it's there, or
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
believe it's there.
yeah.
And so we're bringing it to the light, and that's a good thing. Whether or not I mean, I'm sure that the statistics of those who come forward is less than those who've experienced abuse. Because there are many reasons that frighten people or teach people not to say anything in terms of their own abuse. So something bad will happen to them if they do that in some way. So I'm sure we don't know the full outcome of those things. We certainly know way more than they did when I first started out, when nobody was supposed to be believed if they said they were abused.
Yeah. Is it your hunch then that the levels have not increased, that they've always been there, however, the church culture is moving towards less tolerance of it?
Well, I do think abuse has always been there. Um, but at the same time, the way we do systems changes and has changed over the years. And you think about some of these huge churches. I mean, who's going to monitor that? It isn't. We're not able to monitor many things, and we find numbers in church a precious, important thing, which is also sad.
Yeah.
Because it's the heart and the life that indicate whether one knows Christ, not the numbers. I mean, if the numbers are the big thing, Jesus was a failure. So I think a lot of our thinking is more from the business world than it is from the scriptures.
Yeah. Now, Anisha, I'm really interested in, I wonder if you could help me here. I mean, I often witness situations in churches that, I don't know, I think are clearly abusive. For example, you may have a dominant minister, he's got views on certain things. The congregation may be small, it's often large, but it seems to me that they voluntarily sit under a very dominant, controlling ministry, and they're quite happy with it. They almost opt into it. Do you know what I'm talking about, Diane? Have you experienced this? Is there such a thing as kind of Stockholm syndrome? Why would people choose to attend a church where there is a dominant, almost self-evident bully?
Because we, I think, have been duped into thinking, and it's not just in the church world, that numbers and size are what are the best thing. So if you have a church with hundreds or thousands of people attending, and I go there, I go to the best place.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it has to do with fame and power and all of those things. And it does not have to. I mean, if those are the rules, if those are what say that a church is a good thing, then Jesus was a failure. He
Yeah.
had 12 men and a bunch of women. One of those men told on him and got him crucified.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not of the make that we are praising now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, but I mean, again, what is abuse of power? You know, I'm maybe thinking, you could very prominent ministers. Let's take, COVID has thrown up a lot of these things. People get strong views about vaccines and stuff, and so you get one minister who's really, anti-vax, or he's into conspiracy theories, and sometimes hundreds of people buy into that. Why is there not a culture of questioning, and why do people want to be part of a controlling church?
Well, I don't think they see it as being part of a controlling church. They see it as being part of the best one.
Okay, interesting.
Yes. And so there's a level of pride in that. There is a level of assumed safety in that. I go to this church where that person is the pastor and everybody knows who that person is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting the best. I'm with the most important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they, in many ways, then are blind to what's around them.
Hmm.
And again, if you put that up against our Lord, he was a
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's
So
not
do you think there's almost a
mistakes.
herd mentality with a lot of people?
Say that again.
Do you think there's almost like a herd mentality, that people just go with the crowd?
Oh, sure. Yeah, if all
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
people go there, then it must be a good place.
Hmm.
We do
Hmm.
that with
Hmm.
restaurants.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. Folk talk about Stockholm syndrome. People who kind of just like their captors. Is that similar in church? That people are so, I don't like to use the word brainwashed, that they just can't live outside this environment.
Well, I think people also often don't really know what to look for. So if everybody's going to that particular church and the music is wonderful and everybody praises the pastor or several pastors or whatever it is, they trust all of that.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And they feel good because they're going to some place that they've been told is good. They're going to some place that is important,
Hmm.
going to some place that has some fame. And we
Hmm.
rest in those places
Yeah, yeah.
wrongly.
Interesting. I mean, I find that one of the telltale signs is that, dominant pastors often don't like to be accountable. So when maybe the presbytery or the church authority, whatever it is, moves in them, they kind of brief against everybody. They alone are the heroes. Everybody's out to get me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. They're threatening your good pastor.
Now, is that another tricky issue here? I mean, churches often need to discipline people. People may do things within a church that are wrong. There may be some moral failure. There may be financial failure. Folk have to, confront people and discipline them. It's almost a silly question. This is a difficult area. Can it ever be done in a non-abusive way? And how do you have a healthy church disciplinary system that is non-abusive?
Well, yes, it can be done in a non-abusive way. Jesus did it.
Great answer.
I mean, you think about his discipline of Peter on
Yeah,
the water,
yeah,
and he did it in public,
yeah,
and he did it because he loved him.
yeah,
Which I say that with care because people use that phrase to do awful things. You
yeah,
know, I'm doing this awful thing to you because I love you. That's not exactly the way it works.
yeah.
But the word about discipline literally means a learner, a follower. And so
Discipline. Yeah,
the
yeah,
purpose of it is to teach. The purpose of it is to gain. He was talking to Peter so he would come back to being more of a follower to Christ, even standing on the waves that were making big waves.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And we have not really learned that well. We
yeah.
either
Mhm.
ignore, blame the person who's out on the water,
Yeah, yeah,
or don't pay attention to them or something else. But we don't see that as a place to come alongside, which is what Jesus did, and teach him the thing he was afraid was going to kill him.
hmm, hmm.
So he
So
rebuked Peter about his faith being so little and his doubt being so big. And part of what he did there was in dealing with Peter, he called things by their right name.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the person subject to discipline, if it's done well, should almost thank the disciplinaire for what they've done and the way they have done it in a
Yes,
perfect world.
yes, because you have shown me the truth, and that's what I want.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. I mean, lots of folk listen to this podcast, Dr. Langberg, and some of them may be indeed in a church or in a relationship which is abusive. So if we have a listener, and maybe I shouldn't even say if we have a listener, given the prevalence of abuse out there, we will have a listener who's a victim.
Yes.
Statistically that's true. tell them, as if they were in your office, what they should do?
Well, first of all, if they're in my office, they've already done something important.
Yeah.
They have found somebody to talk to who understands about those things and who they can trust.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. You don't do this all by yourself. And sometimes people are in positions where that has to happen, and that's extremely difficult for somebody. But you need somebody who understands abuse, what it does to people, how it's covered up, who will walk with you and help you figure out what you want to do, not what they think you should do, how to do it in a way that is wise and truthful, but also protective of you. And
Yeah.
so all of those things need to be in place before you blow the whistle.
Yeah. Bring it into the light.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you have dealt with hundreds, probably, definitely thousands of people here. Diane, give me some hope here. Is there a road to recovery for the victim?
When you
Is
say
there a road to recovery for the victim?
is it a road?
No, is there? How does the victim recover from all this? And is recovery possible, or is recovery common?
I have seen extraordinary things in that way, and it's been a very
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. It is a real honor to do that, to watch people speak the truth to me for the first time in their lives. They've said it. To work on the impact of that on themselves and how to strengthen themselves and things like that, to speak up about the abuser, to speak up about an organization that covered the abuse. I mean, there's all kinds of things. It can take years. It can take years.
Yeah.
But then, to see them walk free from it. And that is not the same as walking as if it never happened. There is no place like that except heaven.
Yeah.
So when you walk with somebody who's dealing with abuse and speaking of it and all those kinds of things, you see wonderful change.
Mhm.
And it is really a tremendous honor. But they're going to carry that until they see Christ's face.
Yeah. That must give you great joy to see people moving on and having dealt with it, and
Yes,
being restored.
yes, and to see their faith begin to grow and strengthen, and to see their care for other victims, because they know.
Yeah. Now, moving on to maybe a little more difficult situation. What about the perpetrator? is, is there hope for the perpetrator? Um, is there recovery for the perpetrator? And if there is a perpetrator listening, what should she or he do?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that the word recovery means to return to normal. And that's not possible. You cannot return to being a person who has not hurt others. That's in your history.
Yeah.
And so you have to live with that history. The question is, what does that look like? And how do you, in some ways, use that for good? And it's very difficult to talk about perpetrators because they're not all alike. When I was in graduate school, we were taken on a field trip and to a prison. And we were going to meet with the inmates and all that kind of thing. And I was walking down the jail cells, and the group got ahead of me, and there was a man standing, looking out at us, a large man. And he did his hand, wanted me to come closer to the place where he was, which I did. And he said, "Ma'am, I want to tell you something. I am in this prison because of what I have done to children. And I want you to understand." He knew I was studying to be a psychologist. "And the ones who already walk by here to understand that if they let me out, I will do it again."
Mm.
Now, the honesty there is stunning.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that, typical perpetrators or whatever do is cover themselves up, not just to the world, but to themselves.
Yeah.
So there was something in him that brought that. But that was decades ago. I have never forgotten it.
Yeah.
And I knew he was teaching me when he told me that.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a road to recovery, there is no going back to never having done it.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So now the next question is what can be done in the sense, and a lot of that has to do with two things. Number one, obviously the individual whose life has to be built on keeping others safe from them.
Yeah.
But it also has to be part of what the church does and thinks. You don't love a perpetrator if you just let them go out there and do whatever in your
Yeah.
church. You are not loving the perpetrator. You're obviously not loving those who could be victims. But there's something broken there. And you cannot assume because he served time or she served time that it's not there anymore. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, maybe moving a little bit more personal here. Again, you have seen hundreds, thousands of abuse cases. It's a really personal question, Dr. Langberg, but has this made you cynical about the church?
Well, I have gone through seasons of things.
Yeah.
And that's certainly been one of them, which I have gone through more than once.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And part of that has been talking to God and saying, I don't like your church and I don't want to go back. But I know that he's brokenhearted by it too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he has not left us.
Mm-hmm. So
I have not left the church. I've been in the same church for over 20 years, frankly.
wow.
Which is also extraordinary because I'm an Air Force kid, so we just don't do that.
You've not been anywhere for 20 years, yeah.
But I have been very blessed there, and I have had 3 pastors who have been extremely aware about what I do
Mm-hmm.
and supportive of that and asking questions when they needed to and things like that. So I have, it's a treasure, and I know not many people who do what I do have what I have.
Yeah. Has it made you cynical about Jesus, about the Christian faith?
Not about Jesus.
No.
The more I've studied abuse, the more I've seen his.
Yeah.
So not about him. About systems, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, my trust level is not high. I am a very watchful person.
Yeah. So would you say it's, I don't know, I mean, you described your very early years as a psychologist, hearing girls who reported, incest, and you suggested that you had a fairly sheltered upbringing. Has it made you hard over the years, do you think, or is that not the best word to use?
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean when you say hard?
Has the whole thing kind of hardened your heart? Just hearing a case after case after case. Does it not just thoroughly depress you?
It has not hardened my heart. If it has done anything to it, which it has, it has softened it.
Wow, that's a great answer.
And it is a work that has, though I never knew this at the beginning for a long time, but it has been what has taught me about the cross.
Mm.
And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. Again, I mean, before we come into land, can you just give us a little hints? What are the high points? When you've had a great day, what makes a good day for you, and what makes a bad day?
I don't have many bad days. Well,
You're an American, of course. You're positive. Yes.
No, that's not why. I don't have many bad days because I have learned well over the decades that the tiny bits of change can be missed because you blinked your eye when you're talking about somebody who was sexually abused from the age of 3, as far as they know, until they were in their 20s by multiple perpetrators, all of them called Christians, whatever, father, uncles, whatever. I that's done something to me
Hmm.
in terms of I'm sitting across somebody who's struggling with that, and I'm not impatient. I'm not overwhelmed in the sense of there's nothing that can be done here. I'm not. I quit. I can't do this anymore, because when I get like that, I know who to go to, and that's my Lord,
Yeah.
because
Now,
He does not quit, and I want to be where He is.
it's a great answer. Yeah. What about the various Christian tribes? You've got liberal, evangelical, you've got, complementarian, egalitarian. Are there any tribes or Christian philosophies where abuse is more prevalent, or is uh, abuse an equal opportunities demon? It doesn't really discriminate between liberals or evangelicals.
Well, I don't have numbers about anything like that, so I can't tell you in that kind of way. But my thinking would be that the lower that an organization thinks about women, the more likely the higher level of abuse.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And I think, I'm going to add this, you didn't ask me this, but I think that much of the teaching through the years about women and having them under a man's thumb in some fashion has increased that.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't talk in church about the women who followed Jesus like his disciples did, who did not leave him, who were in
Yeah.
the room waiting for the Holy Spirit with the men.
Hmm.
You don't hear sermons about any of that.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And so the way we have thought about females and the way we have handled that, I think, has increased the damage that has been done to women in Christian circles.
That is so interesting. As a woman, you said you were one of the few female psychologists in the 70s when you started. Did you intentionally try to break the glass ceiling, or it just happened? You weren't an intentional feminist that set out to destroy the machine. Did it just naturally happen?
Yes, yes, it did.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I was the first PhD in the first woman in the PhD program, and that was a secular program. I mean,
Yeah.
we just weren't in the field. Now there's
Yeah.
more of us than there are of you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But it's because I was a female that a girl came to me and says, my father does weird things to me. I had no idea what she was talking about. And I went to
Mhm.
my male overseer, who said, oh, women sometimes make up things, don't believe them. That was my
Mm.
answer.
Wow.
Well, it tells you something about me that I didn't listen to him, but that's how it started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, let's come into land. How on earth do you de-stress? I mean, the stuff you hear in the course of a day, and what do you do?
Well, my husband would tell you it depends on the day. I'm not always as good at it as other times. But for the most part, I've had to learn how to do that. It was either that or get off the rail in the sense of not being good at what I do anymore, or not doing what I do. And I was not willing to do that. What I have learned is that the best thing for me to do is to seek beauty.
Wow. And
And
where
I
do you
do
find
that
beauty?
deliberately. all the time. And that can be in nature. I mean, we have gorgeous weather here today. And when I finish at the office, I'm going to go sit on the deck with my husband. So that's beauty. I walk in the woods. I love, doing flowers and things like that. I have 4 grandchildren who are beautiful and just came back from 2 of them. So I'm always doing things to seek beauty and make sure that I'm feeding it to myself. That's part of who my God is.
Yeah.
And I
Whatsoever
am
things.
to reach out and hold on to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that verse in Philippians, whatsoever things are lovely, beautiful, of good report, think on these things.
Yes,
Fill our mind with
yes.
goodness.
Think on them, see them, touch them, study them. Yes.
Yeah. Now, when I look at your resume, I look at your work rate. It's ridiculous. I always
Yes.
think, Diane, you should see a psychologist about your work rate. It is
I
ridiculous.
live with one, except that he's retired.
Are you winding down? Are you still as busy as you used to be?
I am winding down. I have not been taking new patients, but there's a group practice here that I started years ago
Yeah.
that has grown very well and that I've turned over to Dr. Phil Monroe, who has been working with me for a long time, both here and around the world. And so I have passed that on. I still have people that I see, and I would like, with just hideous histories that I would like to see until they don't need to be seen anymore. But most of my work now is with other therapists, to help them figure out how to handle their cases and what to do and what not to do and all of that kind of thing. And then I have, I mean, I'm not running around the world anymore, but I have been until last year. But now with things like this, I'm doing a lot of things like this where I can answer questions or teach or do whatever. I'm speaking in quote Ukraine in the summer, but I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And Phil and I just spoke in India, but we didn't go there.
Yeah.
So I'm doing things like that.
Well, we appreciate this as you speaking in Scotland, and
Yes,
unfortunately you're
I
not
love
here yet.
Scotland, so I'm happy to be here.
Have you ever been in Scotland?
Yes, I have. I have.
Good, good. Um, Dr. Langberg, thank you so much for what you're doing. Redeeming Power. I mean, it's a book that's really taken off. Are you writing anything at the moment? Anything on your screen that you're working on?
Well, I thought I was through, but my brain doesn't seem to agree with me. I think that I would like to do something, not long, but something about women in the church.
Okay.
So
Well,
I'm in the reading, thinking, taking walks and thinking stage about that.
okay. I think a lot of our readers will have been tantalized by the prospect of that book, and we look forward to it. Dr. Langberg, thank you so much for being with us today, for giving your very precious time. I don't want you to detain you from going out into the deck with your husband and admiring that beauty which you so much love. Thank you on behalf of the church for taking light into the dark places, for taking the stones up. And a lot of nasty bugs hide under these stones, and bugs don't like the light. So thank you so much for giving of your time and your talent.
You're quite welcome. I'm glad to do it.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Healthy Gospel Church podcast. I hope you have maybe enjoy. I'm not sure if that's the right word for today's subject. It's been quite dark, but as Diane speaks about Jesus and good things, let's just focus on him and let's live and enjoy him forever. If you are suffering from abuse, please speak out and speak truth to power. Don't let the bullies bully you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being with us. I hope you all have a great day and rejoice in the freedom that Christ has bought for us.